Chapter 1, Biology, the study of life. Key concept, biology is the study of all forms of life, from the smallest of microscopic organisms to the largest that roam the earth. Earth is home to an incredible diversity of life. The biosphere is everywhere on Earth that life exists. The biosphere includes all the living things and all the places that they are found. Every part of the biosphere is connected with every other part. The biosphere includes many environments. There are land environments. You may remember this from middle school. You learned about the tropical rainforests, the grasslands, deserts, temperate forests, taigas, tundras, polar ice, and mountain zones. There's also aquatic environments, such as this tide pool and this estuary. Saltwater and freshwater environments are very different, even though they're both watery. And portions of the atmosphere also make up part of the biosphere. Biodiversity is the variety of life. Biodiversity will generally increase as you move from pole to equator. Biodiversity is greater in areas with consistently warm temperatures, such as those that are near the equator. The farther north you get from the equator or the farther south, the fewer types of species you'll see. So if you were to go to the South Pole, you may not see as many types of animals as you would on the equator, but you would find a lot of those species. So there may be a bunch of penguins. A species is one particular type of living thing. They're defined as members of a species that can interbreed to reproduce. There's about 2 million different living species that have been identified, and we're constantly discovering new ones. Those honeypot ants are fun little guys that are in your textbook. You can open that up and read about them. All organisms share certain characteristics. Biology is the scientific study of all forms of life, and no matter what you're studying, whether it's plants or animals, you will see that everything living shares these certain characteristics. So all of those animals there are going to share basic commonalities, such as they are made up of one or more cells. An organism is just anything that's living. Any of those living things need energy for metabolism, whether they make it themselves or they rely on consuming others to get that energy. They all have to be able to respond to their environment. And they all contain DNA that they pass on to their offspring. So all living things have DNA in them, whether it's a plant or an animal. So when you may have heard, we talk about a banana having 50% of the same DNA as a human being. That doesn't mean that we came from bananas or bananas came from us. It just means that 50% of that bulk of DNA that makes up who we are also makes up what a banana is. And there we see the little fish with his mouth full of his babies. The next section covers the unifying themes of biology. There are several unifying themes connecting concepts from many fields of biology. We're going to cover some of the basic ones in this class. If you go on to advanced biology, we'll get a little more in depth with these. All levels of life have systems of related parts. So a system is an organized group of interacting parts. A cell is a system of chemicals and processes. A body system includes organs that interact. An ecosystem includes the living and non-living things that interact to make up the ecosystem. And there's a picture of an ecosystem. We talk a lot about systems in science. There's different types. There's open and closed. An open system is more of our natural types of systems. It means that energy can flow in and out of the system. A closed system would be more like the air conditioning in your car. It is a closed system. Nothing comes in, nothing goes out, hopefully. Biologists can study many different systems. Structure and function. We're going to talk a lot about this year. Structure determines function. Those two things go hand in hand. And we're going to beat that into your head this year. Structure determines function, just like a spoon and a fork. You wouldn't want to use a fork to eat soup because its structure doesn't make sense to pick up soup. Whereas you wouldn't want to use a spoon to try and stab a piece of meat. So structure determines function. We use things that are shaped for the best functionality. Proteins with different structures will perform different functions. Heart muscle cells have a different structure and function than stomach muscle cells. Because they do different things, they have different functions. Structurally, they are going to look different. Different species have different anatomical structures with different functions. So in some animals, the tail may be there to balance them out. Some species may use their tail to climb. Some species may use a tail as kind of a weapon. Organisms must maintain homeostasis in order to survive in diverse environments. Homeostasis is another one of those big concepts in biology. It just means the state in which the internal conditions are staying the same despite external conditions changing. So we always talk about body temperature as a good example. Your body has to maintain that 98.6-ish temperature. Some people run a little hot, some people run a little cold. That's okay. So on average, your body has to stay at that 98 degrees. So even when you go outside in February and it's 20 degrees outside, your body has to be able to generate enough heat to keep your insides warm, to keep your body going. Same thing in the middle of summer. When it's really hot and humid, your body has to be able to maintain that 98-degree temperature to survive. If we can't survive, we die. So that definition, homeostasis, is maintaining constant internal conditions. So this example here, we have these little sweat glands that are near our hairs that cover our skin. There's very few areas on our skin that don't have sweat glands. So blood flow, when you get hot, will actually increase towards the skin. It's carrying the heat away from your core out to your extremities, so your skin, those little capillaries, are going to carry that heat. There are tiny muscles that will actually expand those pores and allow the sweat glands to release the water. And when it gets on your skin and the breeze blows, it cools you off. So homeostasis is usually maintained through negative feedback. I know that sounds bad, but it's really not. It's a good thing. So negative feedback systems return a condition to its normal set point. They move towards that equilibrium. What we're saying is that the product causes a decrease in the reaction. So for example, temperature regulation, blood pressure regulation, these are more long-term solutions for your body to maintain homeostasis. In a positive feedback loop, it's just the opposite. It moves away from that equilibrium point. So the product of the reaction leads to an increase in the reaction. Example here would be like fruit ripening. So if one apple on the tree starts to ripen, it starts producing ethylene gas, and that will in turn cause the rest of the apples on the tree to start ripening. And the more apples that ripen, the more gas, the faster they all go. Childbirth is another one. It's trying to get away from that equilibrium point. It's trying to accomplish something. These are more short-term solutions. Positive feedback loops are not long-term. The best example of a positive feedback loop is blood clotting. If you were to chop your finger off accidentally, your body would actually start pushing more blood through your system. Your heart rate would increase, your blood vessels would dilate and get bigger, allow for more blood to flow to the area. Now at first that seems like a really bad idea because you don't want to bleed to death, obviously. But really what your body is doing is pushing more blood that's carrying the fibrin, the proteins, the different things that will actually cause your blood to clot up and start the healing process. The faster they can get them there, the faster the blood will clot. So a positive feedback loop can be a good thing in the short term. It's not a long-term solution. Those negative feedback loops are long-term solutions. So you can see here, this is the picture from your textbook. Thermoregulation, it's just how your body maintains a stable body temperature. You have a thermostat in your brain. It acts as a furnace regulator, and it's going to use feedback. So your nerves are going to send feedback to your brain and let it know, hey, you're too hot, or oh, you're too cold. And then it will cause different systems within your body to interact with each other to regulate you back to that stable homeostasis point. Behaviors and adaptations can help maintain homeostasis. So a behavior is something that we do. like wearing a hoodie in the classroom. That's a behavior. An adaptation is something that is inherited over time. It's getting passed on from generation to generation. And these are things that can help a species survive in a certain environment. So our polar bear here, most of you may not know, polar bear hairs are actually hollow, and that helps them to retain their heat in the very cold polar environment that they live in. And their skin is also black. That serves the purpose of absorbing the sun's rays and helping to heat them up from the outside. Evolution explains unity and diversity of life. Everybody gets scared when we start talking about evolution, but evolution scientifically just means change over time. That's it. Everything evolves. You have evolved because you are different than you were last year, and everything changes. Evolution is the change in living things over time. I can prove it because the 100-year-old farmhouse that I grew up in, when they built it, people 100 years ago were not as tall as they are now on average. So when you walk into a room, the light switches are not up where you're used to finding light switches. They're about a foot lower than where you would expect to find them. So that takes some getting used to. But we can see that evidence of evolution changing things over time. And there's a lot of things that go into that. Some of it's environment. It's a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture. So evolution, that genetic makeup of a population of a species will change. And it occurs through natural selection of adaptations. So those organisms that have the adaptations that better suit them to surviving in the area that they're in are going to survive long enough to pass on their genes to the next generation. The ones that are ill-suited will not reproduce, will not pass their genes on, and therefore they just get culled out of the herd. Adaptations are beneficial inherited traits that are passed on to those future generations. Evolution accounts for both the diversity and the unity of life. So as we go through the different levels of studying biology, you'll see that there's these common themes that you'll find when we're looking at microscopic levels, when we're looking at organismal levels, lots of different themes that you see recurring at different places. So the summary of main ideas of this section: all organisms share certain characteristics, such as all living things are made of one or more cells. They need energy. They have to respond to their environment, and they have to have the ability to reproduce. All levels of life have systems of related parts. Structure and function are related in biology. Organisms must maintain homeostasis to survive in diverse environments. And finally, evolution explains the unity and diversity of life.